Welcome to the Path to Purpose interview show, where we share our unique and universal stories about finding and fulfilling our purpose. My name is Katja, and I'm your host and a mentor for Lightworkers. My intention for this show is to inspire you on your path to purpose. Today, I have a pleasure to interview Carole Gilbert, who is an author. As a child, her life was uprooted by a traumatic experience, and her autobiography tells this story, and she shares encouragement for people. Her children's book also tell her encouragement from God's word. So you are here to hopefully be encouraged on your own journey and find out more from Carole's experience. So let's get started. So welcome, Carole. I'm so excited to have you here. So could you please share a little bit more about you and also tell where you are located so we can put you on the map?
Hi, Katja. Thank you so much for having me. I'm located in Texas, so if I have an accent or something, that's why. But my path started when I was a child. Are you ready for me to start into that, or just lead right in, or?
Whatever feels right for you, so we can dive right in to hear your journey, because I know that was a life-changing experience for you that started everything. So you can start with that.
Okay. All right. Well, I've always lived in Texas. I grew up in Texas in the 60s with a very godly home. My mother was the most strongest Christian I've ever known. So Jesus was very alive in our house growing up. He was actually my imaginary friend for a while as a child, because we lived out in the country and didn't have many friends. So they all lived in town. But anyway, so Mama would always tell me growing up that she would tell me about Jesus, and she would tell me one day I would need to say a prayer and ask Jesus into my heart when I started to understand more about life issues, life situations. And I was a little girl, and I'd say, "Oh, Mama, no, I know Jesus. He's in my heart. And she would just tell me, "No, Carole, there'll come a time." Well, this went on, life went on, and then when I was 9, my mother was killed. And it was a very traumatic death. It's all in my book. But anyway, my life totally changed. I was thrown into one home or then another home. And I went through a lot of abusive situations in these homes. And it was just, stuff that Mother never told me about. She never told me about that side of the world, that there was an evil side of the world. In our home, everything was good and wonderful and loving, and centered around God and Jesus. Well, the first home that I lived in, my stepmother was quite abusive. It was just a horrible situation. And this was about 2 years after Mama had died. And one day, this is where my path goes. One day, it was a really bad day. She had had a really bad day. And it's sort of a funny story, but I was sitting in the bathtub that night, and I was just crying and crying. And one thing in this home, you weren't to cry, or you weren't to be heard crying, because that would just mean more abuse. And so I was in the tub, and I'd go down in the water and try to silence my sobs in a washcloth, and the third time I went down, it was like something just kept after me and after me. And I remembered what Mama had said. And I remembered that about praying to Jesus. And I did that the third time down in the water. And when I came up, it was just like, you talk about your path being totally just opened up. It was like I knew instantly that everything was going to be all right. I had such a joy inside. My sobs were totally changed. I'm just getting all worked up thinking about it. But anyway, that's sort of what started my whole path. After that, I really understood about praying to God and about following Jesus. And so it led through a few years. Now, let me go on with my little pathway that you talk about path to purpose. After a few years and another home or two, down the road of different abuses, um, I turned away from God. I turned away from everything. Our lives are like a road trip. We all are on this journey. You call it a journey, and it is a journey. Um, and we're all on our own journeys. And some of us come to like a tunnel in our road trip. Some of us don't, some of us do. Some of us, the tunnels are wide and they're not even dark. Some of us, the tunnels get really narrow and long and darker. Well, my tunnel had gotten to where it was just pitch black, and I felt totally alone in my tunnel. I had turned away from God and from prayer. I thought, the more I prayed, the more abuse there is, and it just seemed like God wasn't there with me. So my tunnel was extremely dark. I felt like I was alone in my tunnel, and I'd given up looking towards the light, looking for a light. And so many of us get in that situation, and that's the end of my path here. But anyway, I'll keep going. I finally made such a mess of everything that I had to go back to seeking God. I had to go back to looking for that light, and I found that light at the end of the tunnel. And that's what my whole purpose is to share with others how, even if you're on the darkest, longest tunnel, there is a light at the end. And we just have to keep our focus and our hope towards that light. And that light is God. So that's what it's all about, my whole path to purpose here. I went on with life. I turned back to God, and then I got married, started raising kids. And I think God, I look back and he was molding me. I know he was molding me. When I got to be 50 years old and my kids were grown in their 20s, God said, it's time to share your story. Just to do a little backtracking about my mother's death, and then my brother's a few years later, and all the abuse and all of that. When we started having our children, my husband and I, he didn't think that was the best material for the kids to grow up hearing. I didn't know if I really agreed, but that was okay. I did what he asked, and I really wasn't sure. So basically, it was like a big secret. Nobody knew anything. Nobody knew. My kids knew I had a hard life. They didn't know what it was all about. But so when I was 50 and they were in their 20s, God said, it's time to share. Oh, sorry. And so that's when I started the book. My grandmother had always told me growing up that one day I would have to share our story about Mama. And so I had little notes that I'd written. I had poetry. So I gathered up, when I was 50, I gathered up all my notes, all my poems, and I sat down with this pile, and God just sort of worked me all through it. And that's where my first book came out. It took 4 years to write it. And it's really meant for someone to read and know that whatever they're going through it's been gone through before. And even in biblical times, in the Bible, everything we go through is already been gone through before. And there is a light at the end of that tunnel. And for those who aren't in a tunnel, they can help somebody else. My first book has all the Bible verses that had encouraged me, and the examples that just helped me to see and understand it was all part of God's plan. It was part of his path, his journey to get me where I was able to help other people through the same kind of situations. And that's what we all need to do. We sort of, in my generation, younger, and my parents, my grandparents, we sort of got into a mode of sweeping everything under the rug and not sharing things with other people. And we can't help each other if we're not sharing, if we're not telling what happened to us, if we're not just sharing our stories. So that should be part of our path. And I love the way you're doing this, because that's what you're doing exactly through your path to purpose.
Yeah, and I thank you for sharing. And I can just imagine how challenging your journey has been. And then having all those years kind of keeping that secret. And I have had a little bit similar journey of myself.
Really?
I lost a loved one when I was 16. And for many, many years, I did not talk about it. I just kind of blocked that memory, that path away.
Yeah.
Because it was so painful. I just didn't want anybody to know. And then it was like coming like in peace within and having the courage to start sharing my journey. And I hear
Yes.
from you as well, like having the moment, like feeling now it's a time to start sharing also that part of who I am, what my
Mm,
journey was. So,
yes.
what was there? You mentioned that moment when you felt that you received a message, now is the time. Was there moments like that you doubted, like
Oh,
how do I do this? How do my
oh, yeah,
family take it
yeah.
when they know this part of me? How did you deal with those moments?
Well, like I said, it took 4 years to write it. And there were times that, at first I didn't know I didn't want to write it. I didn't know how to write a book. I didn't know how to write it all down. And all I could do was just pray and let him guide me. God guided me. He had my hands sometimes going so fast I didn't even know what I was writing,
Wow.
and that's the way he does with us. There were times that I felt like I was wrestling with him and arguing with him. I don't really want to do this. I don't want to put this in there. Are you sure you want this in this book? And he did everything very beautifully, tastefully, as I've been told. I'm not, tooting my own horn here or anything, but that's what I've been told. And you know, I read it back afterwards, and I thought, wow, he really did write it. I couldn't have written that. You can hear me. I'm just country Carole here, but he did a beautiful job. And yes, there were times I doubted, I argued, I fussed, I didn't want to, all of those emotions. But that's what makes us us. That's what makes us human and makes him God. So
Mhm. And how did you, I'm just curious to know, how did your family then react when they heard all about your journey that was like kept hidden from them in the past? Like how did they react?
well, that's an interesting question. When I got the book all written, I had a copy for each of my children and their spouses in a notebook with a pencil. And it was through the holidays. That's when we're all together. And I gave them each their copy. And I said, I want you to read this, and if there's anything in there that you never want to have to speak of or hear of again, then mark it out. If there's anything you want to know more about, I want you to put whatever it is. And if you see typos, put those in there, or mark that in there. So I sent them all home with my story that night. And I tell you, that was the hardest, one of the hardest nights I think of my life, because it's like you just all of a sudden lay everything out on the table and you say, here it is. You're so vulnerable. You talked about your loved one, and the first time you share it, it's like, oh my gosh, what? I'm just putting it all out there, and it was a weird feeling. But my kids all came back, and they all supported me in having it published so we can, share with other people and help other people. My daughter was pregnant when she read it for the first time, and her husband kept trying to get her to stop because she was just crying the whole time. Oh, I'm sorry. Should have got Kleenex, I guess. But anyway, she was just crying the whole time, and he kept saying, you need to stop, and she kept saying, I can't, this is my mother's life, and so anyway, it was a hard feeling inside. It was a difficult feeling, but I knew God was totally behind this whole thing. And the same thing when we let it out to our community, even my community, our friends, our church. They didn't know anything, and everybody's jaws dropped, and it's like, this really happened to you? And I'm like, yeah, we all have a story. We all have something inside of us that we need to share. And
Mhm.
like I said, we can't help each other. We can't help someone on their path if we're not just sharing and opening up. Now, I don't mean to get vindictive when you have a story or anything like that. And I hate to see when sometimes people do that. They finally tell something, and they want something in return, like justice or something. God is the ultimate judge, and whoever has wronged us, they're going to get uh, their judgment from God. We don't have to worry about that. We just need to share our story, not point fingers, not not go into the blame game, but just share our story to help and encourage and lift up somebody else. And like I said, it really helps to know those Bible verses and Bible examples, because everything we go through has already happened before. Sometimes that's the most encouragement, is just knowing you're not alone in whatever you're going through. And like I'm sure you understand about
Mm.
losing your loved one. You felt really alone, and the first time you started to share it, it gets easier every time, and it just um, makes us take that burden off of inside of us, that pain inside of us, takes it
Absolutely.
all away. God is so good doing that.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that, like how your loved ones reacted, because of course that is often the fear that we might feel, like we have held this secret. And then when we want to share, like we might be afraid, like how
Yeah,
people react to that.
exactly. Their reactions, that they won't accept us, they won't care for us, love us anymore, they won't want to be around us anymore. You have to put all that aside, because when you hold something inside, the only one it's hurting is you.
Yeah.
It's not hurting everybody else, but it is hurting yourself when
Mhm.
you hold something inside.
Mhm. So I really acknowledge you for having that courage to share. And now also here sharing that journey, that part of the journey. And I know that your books encourage people, and that's part of the mission that you have here, to share inspiring messages and encouragement for people who are dealing with the challenging life experiences, and especially children, through your children's book. So, in your opinion, what could help people if they are now there feeling the struggle and feeling the challenge, to see that there is light in the end of the tunnel, like having that dark moment in their lives? So, what could help them in that moment?
Well, the first thing I would tell them to do is pray.
Mm.
uh, and to make sure that you do know Jesus in your heart, that you are a follower of Him, that and then God is with you. You're never alone. Sometimes I think that's the worst thing we do. People reach out to other people, and they don't get the the response that they need, and the love and caring back that they need from that person. That just makes them feel worse. Sometimes we're not very sensitive to each other, but God is, and He loves us. He loves you no matter what. And if you just pray to Him, like I said, when I went down in the water and I came up, I just knew everything was going to be all right. The abuse was still there, but I had this inward joy that it was okay. It
Mm.
was okay. I knew at the end of my tunnel, the light is there, and it will always be there, and I will always be in the light, no matter what happens in the meantime.
Mm.
So that's what I would tell them. First thing's to pray to God, take it to God. And, if they feel they need to talk to someone, find someone that they know will be sensitive towards them, and want to hear their problems and their whatever it is they're going through, their struggles. Don't take it to someone that you hope will be there, but someone will be there. Sometimes that may not be a friend or a family member. That might be a counselor, someone, if you're in school, a counselor at school, or a doctor or something like that.
Yeah.
That's what I would tell them.
Absolutely.
First, pray. Look for that light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, because there is support available. And
Yes.
for some, even the praying though might be challenging, because we might have the moment like you mentioned on your own journey as well, like turning away, like, okay, I don't, because when we go challenging life experiences, sometimes we might be so hurt that we don't want anymore have the courage to believe and trust in God. It might be the moment when we just say God doesn't even exist. And
Yeah.
then we might find challenging to pray. So
Mhm.
what helped you on that moment, like come back to the trust and come back to the belief on your journey?
Well, like I said, unfortunately, I made such a mess of everything, and I had gotten so far into all the wrong things. I didn't have any other way but to go back up towards God.
Mm.
That's why I would have to try to tell anybody, please don't get that far into the wrong things. Whatever it is for you, turn to Him first, and just let it take time. Just keep on and on. You have to be persistent. Sometimes we don't think He answers us quick enough, when we want to hear. And that's a big mistake we make, because He's still there. It's all part of what He's got figured out and planned out on our path, our journey through life. And like I said, later on, you're going to look back, and you can just see how it's all part of His plan. I mean, I look back and Macha, I hope I said that your name right. I love your name. I wouldn't be here talking to you if my mama hadn't been killed all those many years ago, almost 50 years ago. I wouldn't be here sharing with whoever hears this that there is a God, and He's a loving God, if that hadn't happened 50 years ago.
Yeah.
So, but unfortunately, or actually fortunately for me, I made such a mess of my life. I mean, I was, I don't know if you've heard the expression hit rock bottom. I had hit rock bottom and still sunk below. So, the rocks were just going down with me. And I thought, I've got to do something. This is, I have not done good. And that's when I turned away from God, that's what my thoughts were. He's not helping me. He's not doing anything for me. I can do better. And so and I was a child through all this. I was 18 when I turned back towards God, and that's one of the most hard things for me to see, is a child going through a situation that they shouldn't have to go through. And so that's one reason that I really stress sharing. All of us share. Adults need to share. They need to be there for their kids to start with. And, if they need help, if they're having an issue and they're not there for their kids, they need to seek somebody that can help them lovingly. And they need to pray. Pray.
Yeah, that is a powerful thing you are sharing, that the power of praying. And that is something that, whatever way you do it, like finding your own way to just have the connection with something greater than you, and that opens the doors to experience the connection, experience connection and love and support that is available.
Thank you. Yes.
And that is a beautiful thing, to just allowing that part to take place. And you, Carole, I just acknowledge you for sharing so openly about your own journey and how you discovered the power of prayer. And that is a beautiful gift for others, because sometimes we think we are too deep, like there is no way out.
Right.
But
Right.
you are an example that even when you hit the rock bottom and even go below, there is
good.
there
Yeah.
is a way.
Oh, definitely. Yes.
And those moments is very challenging, though, to believe that there is a way. But
Yes.
maybe now through this interview, it's just to hear that it's possible.
Yeah.
And open up to have the support, whatever way that it comes to you, but just allowing yourself to just open up to possibility that there is support available for you.
Yes. Yes.
That it can come in different ways.
Yeah. Don't give up. Don't give up. There's someone out there. God's always out there, but there's support out there. Don't give up.
Yeah. So that is beautiful. And I'd love now you to share, if somebody's interested now, because you mentioned you have written books. So can you share a little bit more about the books and where people can find them if they want to check them out?
Well, my first book, the one that took 4 years, is called Unraveled, Time to Tell. and it's by Lisa Lynn. On my children's books, I go by Carole Lisa Lynn Gilbert, because when you write that kind of a book, a true story, you use a pen name, and of course you change all locations and all this kind of stuff, everybody's names. And so it's under a pen name, Lisa Lynn, but it's Unraveled, Time to Tell. My second book is Unraveled, Time to Hear, an investment toward your eternity. It just goes through the basics of understanding God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit, and what they're all about and what they actually do for us. So it's very simple to read. It's just a very easy book talking about our God. But both of these books, along with my children's books, are at my website. That's carolelgilbert.com. There's a bookstore on there, or you can just go online and put in Unraveled, Time to Tell, and lots of stuff will come up. So the book will come up. I think my website, my Facebook, all that kind of stuff comes up. So, but it's Unraveled, Time to Tell, not just Unraveled, because that's, I think, a vampire book. So I'm not the vampire book. You have to put Unraveled, Time to Tell. So.
Sure. I will put also the links to the description below, so you can just click there and get to the page easily. And now we are coming to the end of the conversation here. So do you have a special message that you would like to share?
Well, I think that would just have to be basically what I've already said. Don't give up. You're not alone. God is there, and He loves you no matter what you've done, no matter what you're doing now. He loves you, and I'm total. I can definitely testify to that. So that would be my words of wisdom. I could go on and on and on, but that's the gist of it. So most important part.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Carole, for being here today and sharing your message and your journey.
Thank you for having me very much.
And thank you for watching Path to Purpose interview show. Stay tuned for the next episode by subscribing to this channel. And you can check also the previous episode and find out more insights from our expert. Stay well and stay blessed. Bye for now.